Hello and welcome to Sync and Flow, the podcast with me, your host, Josie Thorne. I am a Red Tent Women's Circle facilitator, a womb healer, and feminine empowerment coach. I have been guiding women to embody their true essence through womb activations and feminine embodiment practices. I started Sync and Flow to help educate and connect women back to the wisdom of their sacred womb space and cyclical nature. I want to help all women reawaken to the true power of the feminine that lives deep within them, so that they may cultivate a relationship to self that is rooted in pure trust, divine love, and a deeply intuitive connection to the body. Thank you for being here and taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. I hope you enjoy. I'm so excited for another episode of Sync and Flow, the podcast. Today we are having a very special witch sister join the conversation. I'm so excited to talk to Dan today about all things healing, womb healing, witch healing, plant medicines. We're going to have an amazing discussion. So I'm really excited. So, hey, welcome, sister. I'm so excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for reaching out and for wanting to even have this conversation. I'm super grateful.
Amazing. Yeah. So I would love for you to just give a little introduction to who you are, what's the work that you do in the world, your dharma, your soul calling, and like everything that you've just been, chatting to me about.
So my name is Dan. And I am a space holder and facilitator, which really doesn't encompass all of the work that I do, but I feel like it's a good broad umbrella term to kind of let people know a little bit of what I do. I started out as a yoga teacher, and over years that has turned into something completely different. And so right now the work that I do is different events, workshops, and retreats. So of all different variations, workshops that are an hour to 3 hours, and retreats that are 7 days long, working with yoga, breath work, meditation, and I do work in the plant medicine space. I serve cacao, and my partner that we have this retreat business together, he serves Combo San Pedro, and he is a psychedelic integration coach. And so that is like the main juice of what we do. And I also have all of my beautiful one-to-one clients as well, but in those group settings, I think they're really powerful and beautiful. So we do some of them. I'm from the United States in New York. So some of the things that we do are based out of the US and others aren't. So we're all over.
Amazing. And I love asking healers this question because in my experience, it's like your purpose chooses you. And most of the time it comes from a very deep, dark night of the soul. In most instances. And I would love to know like what brought you to this work, and how were you able to have the courage to step into this leadership role and into this role of healer and facilitator?
Okay, fantastic question. And I think there's actually two responses, because exactly what you just said, I don't know anything other than the work that I do. So sometimes when people have asked me like, oh, when was your spiritual awakening? I guess you could say when I was when my grandfather passed away, I think I was 15 going on 16. And the idea that people died was just astonishing to me. It was the first death that I ever experienced that was in close proximity to me and my family. And at that time, when I was 15, I had done mushrooms, smoked salvia, I smoked weed. So like I was on that like existential dread, could not understand it type of wavelength. So I started going to therapy. And in my first therapy session, my therapist, who I still work with today, I feel like sometimes I owe her me being on this path. She was like, I want you to just go to a yoga class. I really think you'll enjoy it. And I went, and from 15 on, I've always, my mat is my safe space. And then a few months later, she's like, I really think you should go to a sound healing. I'm like, what's that? Did that. Then a few months after that, she's like, I think you should get energy work done. Like, she really introduced all of these things along traditional therapy for me. And so it's always something that's been a big part of my life, was the spirituality world. Like, I was the weirdo in high school that,
Oh yeah,
like,
same.
yeah, that, like, I had my crystals. I always went to yoga. I loved reading my fucking hippy dippy books, all that type of shit that people would point out to me. And but then if you want to kind of like fast forward, I guess in a way I kind of like lost myself a little bit. I was still practicing and doing all of those things, but I was like heavily drinking, loved cocaine. So obviously that's a problem. So I had an addiction that I then have moved past since then. But within that time period, eventually found myself again, and then boom, fast forward it again a few more years. So by this point, I was a yoga teacher. I was doing energy healing after I got sober from using hard drugs, but I was still drinking, still smoking, that type of thing. Then I started to, things really, really shifted. And when I really found myself in the plant medicine realm of like holding space in those places, I had learned how to serve cacao years ago on accident, which is like kind of hysterical, but like I was drinking and smoking all the time, and I just wanted to go to this event that was happening, and it turns out it was like a facilitator thing. And so I didn't do anything with it for years because I didn't think that was what I wanted to do. I just wanted to teach yoga and do energy healing. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. It was just for me. For the longest time, that's what it was. Mushrooms and cacao was just for me. But then energy shifted, the world shifted, and that dark night of the soul, ended a 4-year relationship, found out I was pregnant when I ended the relationship. We chose to exit the pregnancy because we were ending our relationship, and it wasn't the time. And so that was a few days after that. And then a few days after that, I put down my dog at 13. And like, that was like the dog that I had that took me from like childhood to adulthood. Right. And so that was really, I think, that like initiation process into being like, no, this isn't just the medicine that you work with for you now with the plant allies. Like, now I could vividly see and hear cacao being like, no, this is where you're supposed to be. That's when like the work moved a little bit away towards mushrooms, and that's when I started working with ayahuasca. And so that's kind of how I am who I am today. I feel like there were a few little droplets that added up to why I work with the plants that I work with today.
Amazing. And if you don't mind me asking, I would love for you to talk about your journey with depression and antidepressants, and coming off of antidepressants, and what you use now to regulate yourself and make sure that you're not like going back into that spiral where you may need those medications again, because I'm so deeply in belief of our body's own ability to heal. And I think many people need guidance around like, when is it the right time for me to go on antidepressants, or when am I in need of actually sitting with my deeper self, and facing some demons that maybe I might not be looking at right now. I just thought I'd ask, since I know you're quite vocal around that part of your journey.
Fantastic. So I really love that, because I get messages constantly about people asking, and I've hesitated to make a follow-up. I've made those like follow-up videos to like 6 months off antidepressants, a year, 2 years. I haven't made my like full blown, it's going to be year 3. I'm coming up on a full, cycle now. And I've been hesitant to do it because I want to start by saying, I went off my antidepressants in November of 2020. And there are times where I have so deeply wanted to be back on antidepressants, just for the sheer fact that it was easy, that I knew I didn't have to sit with any of this, that I knew that like If there was one thing, I was on Paxil. If there was one thing about that medication, the thought came in, and if I didn't want to think about it, I'd be like, no. And the medicine would be like, fine. And so, not that that's really a great thing, but at some points of our journeys, that is where we need to be. And so I went on my antidepressants when I was heavily abusing, like I said, I abused Coke, and alcohol, heavily. And so I realized that I was extremely depressed, and I explain it as like, there was a little, I always call it the baby elephant. There was a baby elephant that was sitting on my chest and was sitting on my shoulders. And I did go to yoga, go to sound healings, get energy work done, but none of that stuff was working. I was just in the motion of it. Like I had started doing it when I was so young that at this point I was like, yeah, this is what I do. I go here, I do this, I go there, I do that. But I was not present for any of it. I wasn't actually learning or expanding in those spaces because I was so deeply depressed. And that baby elephant was kind of holding me down here instead of me actually fully being with every experience. So, I think that medication is sometimes a necessity for people. And I think I wouldn't be doing the work that I do today. My business would not exist if I didn't go on antidepressants for 4 years. And I know that. I may have like down the line gotten to this point, but it would have taken me a lot longer. It was a last resort for me to go on my antidepressants. Like my therapist is very into holistic healing. And finally we sat down, it was her, both of my parents, and myself. And we came to the conclusion that like, this is going to be our last resort, but nothing else was moving that baby elephant.
Yeah.
So I think 100% therapy is necessary, and finding a therapist who isn't going to jump right off the bat and go, oh, you have anxiety? Oh, you have depression? Just take some antidepressants. No.
Yeah.
Finding a therapist that understands the importance of, let's go through all these holistic healing modalities and see what we can do for you first. And we'll know that if we need to get you on antidepressants, it's something that we can look at later on. So, I did go on them. And when I was ready to get off of them, the other reason why you want a therapist who is able to advocate for you is that I went to a psychiatrist. And when I was ready to come off of my antidepressants, I had said, I'm ready to come off my antidepressants. It was the beginning of year 3 that I had been on antidepressants. And she was like, no, I don't think you're ready. But the psychiatrist just prescribed me medication. My therapist was the one who saw me once to twice a week. She was like, no, you are ready. What? And so it was kind of a struggle with the psychiatrist. And then I struggled with her.
I'm sure many people can relate to that. Yeah.
And it's a topic that isn't talked about enough, but I have it often because people find themselves in that situation where they're like, I don't want to just cut cold turkey because that could be that can be so harmful for someone to cut their medication cold turkey. So let's not do that. But you want to start weaning yourself off. And when these people, quote unquote, in power, right? These doctors that think that they know what's best for you, don't really know.
Yeah.
It can put you in a really uncomfortable situation, sadly. I started to wean off. Finally, my therapist called the psychiatrist and we were able to start moving down. And then we stopped. And because COVID hit. And I was like, ooh, wait a second. I don't know if I can handle the state of the world and also just coming off of my antidepressants. So I slowed the process down even further, which was why I was on them for 4 years, because I took a moment to sit with myself and go, this is going to be a big change. The outside world has really changed. So let me be supportive to myself and take it even slower. And I think that that's something that's important to be talked about. Like if people are listening to this and they're on antidepressants, you don't have to quickly do this. I thought I was only going on antidepressants for a fucking year and then I was going to be off. And in a year, my therapist and I looked at each other and I even knew when I said, so it's been a year, I knew she was going to say like, do you really think that you're ready to come off? And my response was no. I knew I hadn't really worked through any of those things. And
Mhm.
her response was also in agreement with mine. And so taking it slow with coming off of medication, if you are somebody that can come off of medication, there's no race. You might
Mhm.
want to just get off of it to get off of it for yourself, but there's no race because now that I'm 3 years out with no antidepressants, like I said, there are times where I'm like, fuck, a lot of these things that have happened to me would have been a lot easier if I had that security blanket, because that's really, in my opinion, what my antidepressant was, a security blanket.
Yeah.
Um, I don't remember what the full question was.
No,
So
that's
that's why
okay.
I'm
That's beautiful.
like,
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing your journey. And I guess I can just pick up off there of just like how important it is to surrounding yourself with a variety of healing modalities, and whether or not you are on antidepressants, it's not like this pill. I think we've been really brainwashed by the big pharma that like one pill is going to save us all, and one pill is going to take everything away, and one pill is going to, do all this stuff. And it's actually, that's not really the case. We are multidimensional beings. And so healing is a multidimensional process, and that means that we need to approach our healing in a multidimensional way in terms of different modalities, doing healing. Maybe you're on antidepressants and like going to the yoga, showing up for yourself. And I think it's that consistency of routine that can also help to shift so much of the mental space, and really understanding like what is below the depression, like what is my depression is just this label that doctors or psychiatrists has given to me, and maybe I've given it to myself, and maybe there's a part of myself that is attached to this label and what that means, because I think we can often find a lot of security in these mental health labels and almost attached to that as like a personality trait, and I think I always want to encourage people to be curious about where is this coming from, maybe, and obviously that question is so layered and so deep. It's not going to be something like one journaling session is going to uncover. It's going to, take like a few months to be asking yourself these questions and to really start to unravel, like, why is this happening? What is happening in my external environment versus my internal environment? And how are these two spaces, the internal and the external, not correlating for a harmonious state of being?
you worded all of that so beautifully and so perfectly. And there's so many points for me to really like touch on here. I think one of my favorite things being a practitioner is that I love when I get new clients, like one-to-one clients, or even the clients that come on our retreats, and we'll always ask, are you in therapy? Because I cannot tell you how, again, it's a multitude of things that you put together. It is so powerful and beneficial to people when they do that type of clinical work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alongside this like metaphysical
Mm-hmm.
work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I love when I have clients that also work with a therapist, because it's really cool that like our client is the in-between person. And I've had people say to me, so I was talking to my therapist this week and they said that I should look at this and that you probably would know what this means. And so then I kind of get to go through it and say, from my perspective of a space holder and facilitator, of an energy practitioner, of what that really means. And then I can say, well, now this kind of goes into the clinician part. So you should bring this back to your therapist and let me know what they say. And it's this really beautiful, like kind of full wheel thing. And I think that's really what you were trying to say is
Mm-hmm.
it is, I always tell my clients that we're walking the yellow brick road together. And because there's not just one thing, it's a bunch of little bricks that are going to be set down. And the reality of it is that sometimes you're going to pick another brick up and be like, that wasn't working.
Yeah.
Pieces to a puzzle. And sometimes we really want to do something, like sometimes people come to plant medicine because they really want to do plant medicine, and it's not for them. Some people
Yeah.
go to yoga and they're like, I really want to immerse myself in yoga. And then they find out actually yoga is not really my thing. You know what I mean? Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's Tai Chi, maybe it's Qigong, maybe it's a different form, but it's just not yoga, right? So
Exactly.
it's a pizza pie, it's a puzzle, it's the yellow brick road.
Yes.
And the thing is, the importance of having different things. I always say, like, your daily practices also should not be like daunting and boring.
Yeah.
So when I have clients that are like, I hate doing the same thing every day. I don't want to fucking wake up and meditate and journal and then do yoga. I'm like, so why are you waking up and meditating, journaling, and then doing yoga? And they're like, well, because I have to do my morning routine. I'm like, there's so many other things you could do.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, like
And we
there.
need to find what works for us, you know? Like I love meditation, yoga, and journaling, but that's not everyone's like cup of tea. And sometimes like meditation can be like a walk in the sun, or like getting your feet into the earth, or movement meditation. I've been so into dancing as a form of meditation, and just anything that connects you deeply with yourself, I think can be a form of meditation. And I think people need to experiment with what works for them, but it's like you're not going to know what works unless you try it, and not just try it once, like at least do something around 5 times, because of course in the beginning there's going to be that resistance to do it. And sometimes if you quit before you work past the resistance, you may not know whether it's actually working or not, because the resistance can create that block to that deep presence like you spoke about before.
Exactly. I think people write off things also too quickly when they start to realize that there are deeper levels to themselves. And if they do a practice and it should, like, I get that with people that come to my breathwork workshops all the time. They're like, wow, that was really intense, which, like, it is intense. So it's really not for everyone. But a lot of people will be like, I didn't expect that to come up for me. Like, it's just breath work. It's not just breath work. If you allow yourself to go there, your traumas may start to come up. You may feel this visceral reaction that's like, what the fuck? And like, you have that realization of, oh my goodness, that's what's underlining in that depression. And labels are
Exactly.
really interesting. And it's funny because years ago when I first went on my antidepressants, my therapist was like so adamant about not labeling, because she was like, I don't want you to feel this, like, that this thing is yours, right? Like, we take labels on like it's ours and it's
Yes.
mine,
Yes.
so understanding that, like, although this may be a diagnosis that works, because it does have some positives, right, to use a diagnosis, because then we can understand how to support said diagnosis.
Exactly.
But as humans, we cling. We cling to that. And so the importance of having I've also referred to it as a toolbox, is like, if, say, the diagnosis is depression, it's going to show up in different forms. So not every form is going to need a hammer. Some is going to need a wrench. Some is going to need a screwdriver, because there's different
Yes.
layers to those labels and diagnosis and
Yes.
traumas. There's different layers, and you need different things to combat different layers, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. And I love that you said that about the toolbox and like the different tools, because when I was going through my phases of depression, and I was never on antidepressants, but I had extreme anxiety, and I didn't really realize it until it became social anxiety. And that was for me like a massive wake-up call, because I'm such a bubbly, social, friendly person that I'd never experienced social anxiety. I'd experienced anxiety in other forms. But then when it got really, really bad, that's when the social anxiety started to come up. And that's when it was so obvious, like I couldn't actually ignore the fact that I had anxiety, and like this was an actual thing that I needed to, work on healing and work with my nervous system and work with my inner child. Because a lot of the time I feel like these mental health imbalances come from a very dysregulated, very sad and scared inner child, that hasn't felt held, that hasn't been nourished, that hasn't been comforted in the ways that it needs to be, because unfortunately that's not really
a mainstream understanding, and it's not really something we're taught in schools. Like, babes, you need to like look after your inner child. Like, this is a little creature living within you, and she or he or they, like, they need your love first and foremost. And especially I think as women, we're so like conditioned to just give and give and give and give to the outside world without actually remembering that we need to fill our own cup up first. And so I think working with the different layers of whatever mental health challenge you may be facing right now is really important, because it's going to have a mental layer, it's going to have an emotional layer, a physical layer, and a spiritual layer. And people need to understand that, like I said, we are multidimensional beings, and these symptoms are going to show up in many different ways, and we need to have the right tools. And if we don't have the right tools to unpack that and unravel that, we need to work. People need to reach out to facilitators like yourself, healers like me, you know, like, because we've been through those deep, dark journeys, and we're here teaching this medicine because this has been like our lifeline, you know. It's like we've come to this work not because we necessarily wanted to, but because we actually had to, you know. And I think that's the beauty of finding your soul calling and finding your purpose, and your purpose finding you, is that you know that there's no ways you're not going to serve this work into the world.
100%. 100%. It's a part of you, and you can ignore it all you want, but when you ignore it, it comes back tenfold, you know? So it like you even said that you couldn't ignore that anxiety was a part of you at that moment. God, great spirit, universe will be like, you wanted to not notice it then? Well, let me help you notice it right now.
More, exactly. And then they just like turn up the volume, and you're like, are you listening now? Are you paying attention now? And I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like, it's beautiful, but it's also really fucking hard when you're going through that and you're in that. And yeah, I was ignoring my anxiety for years and years and years, you know, and I didn't have the right tools, but slowly I was able to find them. And yeah, I love that you spoke about how yoga was the starting point of your healing journey, because for me, it was as well. And just like reconnecting back to the primal body, I think is such a beautiful way to start. Yeah, let's talk about plant medicines now, because so much also of my healing journey, like yoga and plant medicines, were like the two that kind of like bridged this like physical, mental, emotional, spiritual realms for me. I remember you already spoke about like how mushrooms were your first intro to plant medicines. Mine as well. Mushrooms, like, I hold them so dear to my heart. Yeah, actually in 2019, I did a 5-gram mushroom journey. And that was like the largest dose I'd ever taken. Before that, I think I'd literally only done like 1.5 grams at once. So it was like a massive jump for me, but I knew I was ready. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. And then the 9 months after that were one of the most hardest experiences, darkest times of my life. And yeah, they really just help bring up so much to the surface. And I think that mycelial effect of like the fungi in the soil bringing forth the nutrients and the nutrition of the soil to the surface is like, that's what I feel like mushrooms can do to the psyche, is everything that you've been burying and suppressing, and childhood trauma that you haven't wanted to look at, maybe you've even forgotten, as a way of coping with it, you know. And I think that's the beauty of mushrooms, is it brings things to the surface so that we can actually tangibly work with whatever is going on.
Yes, absolutely. They are, for me, mushrooms, the first time I believe in some ways I was too young when I started doing mushrooms. But for me, it was it was less of the inner child at that point because I was 15 or like I was like 14 or 15. So I was the inner child, right? I was the inner teen at that point. But but for me, I remember sitting on for the people that listen that are from Staten Island, that are like from where I'm from, I was at like Wolf's Pond Beach Park. So it's like a park and then it goes right onto a beach. And I remember just being devastated that all the other people in the park weren't on mushrooms because it was like, oh my God, they don't understand that we are literally the same person, right? I had that like very young child, like, I was like, oh my God, these poor people don't know that like it's okay to die and it's just transitioning and we're actually all one. None of us are separate. Like that for me was like I had understood it from going to yoga a little bit. I had understood it from the books that I was reading a little bit, right? But having that first experience, I was just like shocked and confused. I was very confused for a long time about that too, because I didn't have the proper support around me to explain to me like, yes, you're totally normal. So for years, I thought I was fucking crazy because really none of my other friends were having experiences like that. If they were doing any type of psychedelic, whether it was doing acid or they were doing mushrooms or they were smoking salvia, they weren't having that reaction that I had where I was like, everything's amazing and death is life. They were like, dude, you were just supposed to like hang out and like enjoy. I'm like, I am enjoying this lifetime. They're like, what the fuck? So for me, it was a big turning point for me because then I also started to understand myself more, like what you were saying, that I started to understand I love my friends, but my friends do not fucking get me, you know? And then I was kind of like, wow, this is that also something that comes up when you do this type of work is the loneliness. The loneliness, especially when I see people sit with plant medicine, because I know that's kind of like the segue that we're moving into. A lot of the times what we say to our like guests or clients that are doing medicine with us is, don't run home and tell your closest friends your experiences, especially if they haven't done medicine, because they're probably not going to get it. Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, I just had this unbelievable, life-changing, grandiose experience. And then you go home because you want to share it with your loved ones, and your loved ones look at you like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And
what crack are you smoking?
Exactly, 100%. And like, we'll never refer to it, like in our community, we'll never refer to it as like a drug, you know, we'll always refer to it as a medicine. But sometimes if you come home, people that aren't in the same space as you will be like, so this is what you did? You paid to do drugs in the middle of the woods with people for a weekend? You know, like they just don't get it. So your experience can really fall short if you share it with people around you who don't understand the process of plant medicine.
Totally. I always say that also to the women who attend my women's circles, because I mean, my mentors has been accused of hosting cults, you know, and like hosting cult circles and stuff, because people don't understand what red tent is, and they don't understand like the depth of womb connection and blood medicine and like all these things, you know. And it's like, it can actually sound quite culty if you just hear it from like that surface level, like understanding. But that's why I always say, like, people, please just sit with your experience and integrate it. And when you feel ready, when you feel time, like share it from the share it from this is my experience. This, you know, it's not, because it's such a subjective experience, really. Every trip, every medicine ceremony is so subjective. And, you know, you could be having an amazing transcendental experience and the person sitting next to you is like crying their eyes out and like, you know, releasing like 10 years of childhood trauma in like a 1 hour or however long sitting, you know. And I think it's so varied, the experiences that people go through. And it's also, I truly believe that medicine, psychedelics, they're so intelligent in the way that they work. And I believe that you will never be given or shown something that you're not ready for.
Okay, so that is so unbelievably important. So speaking on plant medicine, you'll never be shown something that you're not ready for. Also, you'll never be pushed into something that you weren't already thinking of doing. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some really unsafe plant medicine spaces, because there definitely are. So like just prefacing it with that, but coming to the point that like there are things that like I have, oh, sorry, were you about to say something?
No, I was just going to say, and beyond the ego, because I think like we think like, oh, our ego is only ready for like this level. And then it's like, actually, no, babe, your soul is ready for the next level. Sorry, I just wanted to preface that. Please carry on.
Yes, no, thank you for saying that. So there's this like, if somebody does something post ceremony, they were already thinking of it. They were already potentially about to embark on this journey of doing what they did post medicine in some way, shape, or form. Now, granted, the medicine may have given you the little like nudge. It may have given you that little push. It may have given you that insight that you needed to know, okay, this is really what I'm supposed to do next. Whether that is going deeper into plant medicine or just something as simple as like, okay, you know what? I'm ready to forgive my parents. Maybe I'm not ready to talk to them and have a conversation with them, but from afar, I can begin to forgive them and start working on that forgiveness journey. Or like for me, like I ended a 4-year relationship after sitting with ayahuasca. That was already in somewhere in my subconscious. It was already a thought process. And ayahuasca was basically, she just sat in front of me and was like, listen, you don't have to do it, but you can just stay in the same shit that you're sitting in. So if you want to do it and you want to push to this next thing, this next chapter, now's the time to do it. So it's also understanding that these things lay dormant in our bodies, and most of the plant medicines, if not all of them, that we're speaking about that have this like psychedelic effect, are willing to just kind of give you, not always push you over the edge, although sometimes you can feel like you're being thrown overboard. There's a tsunami happening next to you, and that's what you're being thrown into. But they're giving you that nudge to be like, okay, now's the time. You're not always going to take it up though, because we have clients that come, they sit with it, they get the information, and then they go, nope, not doing it yet. So it doesn't mean that if you come sit with the medicine, you're actually going to change what you want to change. And also what I want to say is we have had people in the past come sit with medicine and then be very like angry about what came up. Saying things like, I already dealt with this. I don't know why it would bring this up for me, or I don't need to work on this. I've worked through it enough. Yes. And when you've sat with medicine, you understand that like, yeah, sometimes the medicine's going to show you things that you may have dealt with layer A, B, and C, but now we have D, and then we have E.
Yes, babe. That is something that has happened to me again and again and again and again and again. Literally. And it's like, it's such a humbling experience, especially when you can approach it from soul consciousness, not from ego consciousness. Because like sometimes things, like 10 years or 20, I don't know, but like people need to realize like we're not just processing for our lifetime, like we are fucking processing for our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our great, like so many lineages, so many generations, like at least up to, they say generational trauma is up to 7. I think it's way more than that, but that's what they've like scientifically proven through studies with mice. But if you're sitting in plant medicine, you need to realize that like you are going to be processing, releasing, and dealing with trauma that might not even belong to you, you know, that comes from like 7 to 10 generations before you. And sometimes that's why things come back again and again and again, you know. And I always see it as this, it's like a spiral, you know. We come back to the same blocks, not because we haven't dealt with it, but because now we have a greater level of self-awareness to be able to tackle that block from a different state of being, from a different belief system, from a more mature, grounded version of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to touch upon the fact, especially with the womb work that both of us do.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes you're not just processing for your family, you're processing for those that you have let into a space in your womb. Energetically, people, first off, sexually wise, people that you have had relations with in a sexual way, you're letting that energy enter you. And if you don't clear that energy out, and then you go and you sit with medicine, some of the shit that you're working on, it's not even yours. It's somebody else that you may have had sex with in the past. And also, even like you brought up before, like being in like a woman's body or like a womb holder's body, is the fact that like that space is of eternal nurturing. That's exactly what it is. It's life-giving, right? And so there are even other times where it doesn't have to be a sexual experience, that we take somebody's energy on into our womb. And as we're sitting with the medicine, so like for me now, combo is not a psychedelic, right? It's a physical medicine. For me though, I swear it's psychedelic, because anytime I sit in a combo ceremony, the amount of energy, I keep looking down at my womb, the amount of energy.
Let's just look at the womb zoom.
It is the womb zoom.
Love that.
And so the amount of like energy that I can feel myself processing in that moment, that I'm like, okay, this is mine. Okay, this isn't mine. I know where it's coming from in my womb. And like, I can even speak into my relationship, like with my partner, right? We have like a romantic relationship, which is so funny because people are constantly guessing, and I love that game. But we're business partners, right? And we're partners in ceremony. We're both facilitators together, and we've been in ayahuasca ceremonies together before, where one of us has had to leave the room because we're starting to tap into each other's energy, even if we're on opposite sides of the room. And I'm like, oh my God, this isn't mine. And I'll be like, oh, I really don't want to deal with this, but I know it's his. And vice versa, where after a ceremony, if we're sitting in integration, you know, usually privately, he'll say it to me. If he's hosting the integration, usually privately, he'll be like, did you hear me? You know, when you can hear someone purge in the room and you're like, ah, that's so-and-so. You've like sat with them enough that you're like, oh, there they go. And so I'll be like, yeah, I did. I heard you. And he's like, yeah, that was all yours. Like you start to know like what's mine that's coming up, what's my parents, what's my family, what's my friend, what's my partner. And it takes a lot of discernment and self-reflection and self-study to know what really is my energy. And it's also not to say that like there are still some days where I'm like, I can't decipher. I don't know whose energy this is. Maybe it's mine, maybe it's someone else's. So what do I have to do? Sit with myself more.
Exactly.
Listen more.
Exactly. I was just about to speak on that discernment. I think it's so crucial. Especially as women, like we take on so much, we're so caring and nurturing, and we do take on a lot of, especially the people that we live with and the people that, like you said, we're sexually involved with. And so we take on a lot of energy. Like the womb is a sponge, and it's going to absorb things around us, emotional fields around us, whether we like it or not. And unfortunately, most people are not educated on energetic hygiene and are also not educated on energetic protection tools and methods. And yeah, like you said, you need to be having, it's like almost like I want to see it as like clay, you know. It's like you have this ball of clay, and like in this ball of clay is all the energy that's in your field and in your subconscious. And over time you need to work with the clay, get to know it, so that you can close your eyes and tell what like color and texture and feeling it is, you know, so that you can slowly start to pick apart, okay, that's not mine, okay, that. I'm processing that for my mom because she doesn't have the space to process that in her life. And I'm holding that for my brother because XYZ, you know, and I think, and for my family and my friends and the people I'm surrounded by. And I think, like you said, you need to sit with yourself and really work with yourself on a very intimate, raw, and most of the time messy way, you know, to be able to discern, because the healing journey, it's not easy and it's not clean cut. And like I said, I did this most beautiful mushroom ceremony of my entire life, and then the next 9 months afterwards were fucking hell for me, you know. But the clarity and empowerment that I got on the other side of those 9 months put me in a place where I will never, ever regret that period of my life, you know. And I think a lot of people are scared, whether subconsciously or consciously, of sitting with medicine because they're worried about what may come up. And if those people are listening right now, please reach out to healers and support systems and have a facilitator, have a therapist to hold space for you, because you don't need to go through those experiences alone. Like, you really don't. And you shouldn't. It sometimes can actually be re-traumatizing. Like, I know I've definitely re-traumatized myself through sitting with mushrooms during a time when, like, I was not emotionally stable. I was not mentally stable, you know?
I think that's a really, so I'm, as we know, you and I know, I can be very spicy with my takes.
I'm here for the spice, babe. We're here for the spice. Literally, bring it.
And even certain quote unquote safe spaces or trauma informed spaces, it is like choosing to sit with plant medicine. Now, I definitely believe at this point in my life, like, if people want to sit with medicine, like, you should just, there are people that are trained in these things, and you should be able to find somebody who can hold that safe space, hold that space safely for you. However, there are even, and people don't realize that there are some plant medicine spaces that, yes, you can get re-traumatized, even if all of the facilitators and the medicine servers do everything right. You're signing up for a really possibly difficult, sometimes euphoric, sometimes orgasmic. And you're just like, this is like the greatest experience of my life. Yeah. And then, you know, I've experienced that, where one of my ayahuasca ceremonies, I was like, I'm on top of the world. This is great. And then literally the following night, she was like, okay, now that you trust me, you know what I mean? Like, now I got you right where I want you, you know? And so for me, even though I was in a safe space, I had things that were sort of re-traumatizing. And my partner Dylan says it, especially in our integrations that we host every month. He'll really try to bring it up when people are especially new to the medicine. He's like, sitting with medicine is traumatizing because of the fact that you're accessing parts of your subconscious that you most likely would not be accessing had you not chose to sit with this medicine. Most people don't get themselves to the point to meditate that deeply without medicine that they can constantly sit there. There are some people that do that on a daily basis, and more fucking power to them. But the average Joe doesn't do that. And that person that goes to sit in ceremony, when all of their things get brought up, it can be re-traumatizing, because now we're like, hey, this is all the shit that you've pushed down. And although it's holding you back, we need to look at this again. And you have to recount those things. So 100%, I think people should be sitting in a space where, at least if your journey is re-traumatizing or just traumatizing in general, which I have had plant medicine ceremonies that have been traumatizing, I at least had the opportunity that there were people around me to support me during it when I was freaking out, saying, please take my skin off. And they were like, this is not how that works. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be here right now. They're like, breathe, you know? Totally. And then at least that next morning, I had people that could help me kind of like, what the fuck did I just sit through? What the fuck just can't? And I had that support. And I think people are sometimes also resistant because we're not used to having communities. We're not used to having support. Our society wasn't bred to sit around. Our society it used to be bred to have the red tent. Now everybody thinks the red tent is like the craziest idea when like, hello, that is how support systems work. You get what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
Exactly. Yeah. Healing in community is such a big part because it's like we need to be able to show people our deepest, darkest vulnerabilities in order to realize that like we don't need to keep them as these big fucking secrets anymore. Like everyone has these challenges. Everyone will go through some sort of flavor of anxiety, depression, like body dysmorphia, like, you know, just big disconnections from themselves. And I think the more we can make these conversations mainstream, the better for it. I also think we've been bred to want to only be comfortable. And I think what plant medicine teaches you is that sometimes you need to get so fucking far outside your comfort zone in order to grow and become that next level version of you, because the version that you're at right now has only manifested what you have. You know, you've only achieved everything that you've achieved at that level of self. And if you want to get to the next level, you know, manifest greater things, earn more money, become more confident, like whatever, insert blank, whatever, you know, like you need to jump and to raise your vibration and grow into that next level of self. And that's not going to be a comfortable process. And for most of us, it isn't a comfortable process. I think when you are deep in the work, like you and me, we learn to be able to start to navigate that uncomfortability in a comfortable way, but it's still uncomfortable, you know, no matter what, we're still growing beyond our edge, beyond our limits. And I think people need to realize that like we are in a society where it's like easier is better, quicker is faster. Like we choose the easier route, we choose the shortcut, when actually your healing and your soul is requiring you to go down the yellow brick road through the long and dark forest. You know, that's going to take you that much longer. But that is where sustainable healing comes from, that like consistent and slow titration kind of effect. You know, like you're not any plant medicine facilitator or ceremony that's going to be like, oh, just come and like we'll solve all your problems. Like, no, red flag, like massive red flag, because that's never going to happen. And if you approach medicine, especially I think, you know, mushrooms and ayahuasca, like medicine that is of the earth on such a deep level, if you think that you are, you know, like if you think you are prepared, think again. If you think you're going to heal everything in one go, think again, because you will be humbled again and again and again until you can be like, okay, take the wheel, you know, like Jesus, just take the wheel. Gaia, take the wheel, like use me as a vessel. And that's kind of my approach now is to plant medicines, is like I set my intentions for myself, but in terms of the way that the medicine works for me, I'm curious and I ask it to show me what I need to be shown.
That is exactly what you're supposed to do, because people also like, we have a very serious like pre-integration process to bring people into ceremony with us. And we try to tell, like, stop getting so attached to your intention of what you want the medicine to do for you.
And the agenda.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So people have a lot of expectations. And I think that sometimes can ruin some people's experiences when coming to plant medicine. And I get it, because you're like, well, I'm going to go do this thing. And here's my laundry list of things that I need to work through. And you work for me. And the medicine's like, that's absolutely not how it works. I don't fucking work for you. You know what I love? When we're in ceremony and like there's somebody, there was a ceremony a long time ago. And this man, he shared how like he had a no-go. He did not feel the medicine whatsoever. And at first he was so angry. And then by the end of the ceremony, like in his share the next morning, it was so beautiful because he was like, I came here with all these intentions and I was like, you're going to fucking work for me and you're going to show me all these things and you're going to fix this and that. And the medicine was kind of basically like, what if you didn't? What if you just allowed yourself to look around at what other people have going on in their lives? And so because the medicine didn't like hit him, and although he drank and it was with the medicine was kind of like, no, you need to actually take inventory of what the fuck is going on around you. And so he still got out of it. What he needed was to observe more. That was what he needed to learn. But the intentions that he said, he was like, I will work on those another time. Today, this was what I needed to learn. And so you coming and saying, this is my intentions, but also, hey, what's going on? What are we going to do? Is important to have that openness because the medicine is intelligent. All of the plant spirits are very intelligent. And they're going to give you exactly what you need, nothing more, nothing less. And when you start to realize I can't control, which is also kind of scary, right? Like I can't control what I'm going to get out of this. You then start to realize the beauty of surrender.
Yeah, totally. And surrender as a guiding force. And it's like, I feel like as soon as you think you've surrendered, surrender some more, because there's always a layer below the layer which you are willing to let go to. And I think that's why, you know, there's no levels of like, even though you and I have done plant medicine so much, it's like we don't think that we are like above everyone, or we are like these, like we are the queens of like mushrooms or whatever. It's like, yes, maybe, but like not really, because every time we sit with it, it's like there's a deeper layer that we still explore within ourselves. And that's like, I think so beautiful, is like there's always a deeper layer to anything that you're facing and anything that you are going through.
And I'm jealous when someone's like, I've never sat with the medicine before. I'm like, wow, I'm so jealous, because I feel like also when you've sat in ceremony, you start to realize, fuck, like I know what I'm signing up for. Because I don't know what I'm signing up for. You know how intense it could get. But somebody, when they're new to it, they're like, this is great. What's going to happen? You know?
Yes, totally. It's so beautiful. I want to just speak on, because I mean, just from my personal experience, I have a lot of friends and they are, you know, we go to lots of festivals and most people are on psychedelics, whether it's acid or mushrooms. And I mean, I tried DMT for the first time 2 weeks ago, which literally blew my mind. I haven't sat with ayahuasca yet, but she is calling me. And so I know it'll happen when it's meant to. Back to the festival space in Cape Town, South Africa, where I'm from, is really, really big. And most people will consume psychedelics, either acid or mushrooms, a lot of ketamine as well. And so I really want to find out about what your stance is. And this can obviously be an opinion, as it will be, on the way that people may mix substances and mix things. And like, I personally could never take mushrooms and drink alcohol, because for me personally, that feels like a massive disrespect to the medicine of mushrooms, because I've gone so deep with them as a medicine and as a teacher and as a healer. Like they connect me to all that is holy and pure within the earth realm consciousness. And so I could never do that, but I just want to know what your kind of personal take on that is. And
thank you for that question. So I really don't go to festivals or like raves or kind of anything. Honestly, the lights are too much for me. Everything's just like overstimming. So like in me and my own personal life, I don't usually do anything like that. But
Yes.
from a child, I mean, because I was a child when I did mushrooms, right? But from the beginning of my medicine journeys, like when I would take acid, when I was in college, I wasn't taking acid and like going to hang out with people either. I was like taking acid, and then I would walk to Prospect Park, and I'd have my journal, my book, my yoga mat. Like it was still, even though I was like in college, and I'm like, look at me, I'm in college doing acid. Like I was still like meditating with it and doing all that. So for me, my journeys have been always very like internal. And so the idea, like when people are like, oh my God, yeah, I'm on mushrooms right now, and we're like out and about, I'm like, what? That's crazy.
Yeah,
How are you doing this right now? I would be sobbing on the floor, having a whole thing go on in my head and my heart, you know? So I'm just different kind of in that sense. But I think I don't believe mixing the medicines is good. I'm going to come at it not from like a clinical or like that type of perspective, but from like an energetic perspective.
Yes,
I
let's talk about
definitely,
that.
I think there is something so beautiful about people going to festivals and going to raves and taking medicine or doing other types of things and like really letting themselves enjoy that ecstasy. But I do think that if you are going to do that, protecting your energy before you take that substance, protecting yourself before you go into that festival or before you get there, and then every evening cleansing yourself out, and every morning re-protecting yourself, cleansing yourself out. Like that is so important, especially if you're going to be around all these people who
With a
are
lot
also
of energy.
who are also under the influence of their own things that they're taking, right? So energy is just fucking flying. And the reality of it is, more of the people are not going to have any type of protection cleansing practice. So you really need to double down on the protecting cleansing practice. And so I don't think mixing, in my opinion, is the right thing. Like when we have clients come to us, we don't recommend that. I will tell you, because it has nothing to do with me, that there is someone who just got in trouble because they serve ayahuasca and their ayahuasca wasn't strong enough, so they fucking spiked it with mushrooms and didn't tell any of the people that they were.
Oh my God.
And that person is going to be in a lot of trouble. And if not a lot of trouble here on this physical plane, metaphysically, they will have a lot to deal with. There are obviously the people that attended that were very upset and angry, and rightfully so, because especially in these ceremonial settings, right? Because like in the ceremonial settings, we don't mix. There's not, unless it is a very clear reasoning of why we're mixing medicines, the medicines are not mixing. So when you go into those festival spaces, I think that there are some people that benefit from the mixing of it, but also know what mixes correctly and what mixes incorrectly, because there could be a lot of potentially harmful contraindications that people are just like, I'm at a festival, so I'm gonna take A, B, and C, and it's gonna be a good time. No. So making sure that you've done the medical research, the scientific research, and then if you want to go through it in that like spiritual research, really checking what is supposed to be mixed, because some medicines can be friends. Other medicines are not friends. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. And I think it just comes down to that like level of personal discernment. And also the level of self-awareness and embodiment that you are currently creating, and from which you are taking the medicine and taking, like I don't really take mushrooms at festivals anymore. Like I can't, because it's just like you said, it's too much of an internal process, and like I never know what kind of channeling is gonna like jump out of me, and it's like gonna scare, and I'm like, sorry,
like I need some space, I'm processing.
Literally. So for me, if I had to take a psychedelic at a festival, it would be LSD. But yeah, mushrooms, I find they're too much of an internal process and really should be taken slowly and not so much like stimulus, I think is like beautiful. I really think it's beautiful when you can get to the, I mean, I'm not going to like recommend this for everyone, but if you are and there are many experienced psychonauts in Cape Town, it's kind of like a little psychedelic hub for people. But if you're an experienced psychonaut, like experiment with doing it alone, and like you said, like with a journal under a tree, make a date out of it. Like beautiful self-care dates that you have with yourself. And you never know what's going to come through. Like this one time I did 3 grams of mushrooms by myself, and I was just lying in the sun, and my dog was my trip sitter, and it was so beautiful. And then I literally felt like my guides like come down through the sunlight and like hold me in this like golden halo. And I didn't really know what was going on, but I felt this presence around me, and it was so beautiful to have those experiences of divinity on a personal level, because like we can experience these really euphoric states with psychedelics, but if we're not present in and grounded in ourselves, they're not going to have a lasting impact on our journey. And I guess that brings me to a question around integration. Let's just have a jam on that, because I watched this reel of yours the other day and I laughed so hard, and you were like, don't sit with medicine again and again and again. You're like, don't sit with medicine if this, don't sit with medicine if that, don't sit. And I was like, yes, like please. Like I think sometimes people are just so happy-go-lucky, like let me just pop some shrooms, and then the week goes by and like, oh, let me do it again because last weekend it was really fun, and like la la la. And it's like, after I had my 5-gram journey, I didn't sit with shrooms for like maybe 10 months, maybe a year. Like I knew, I was like, hey, I need to integrate this shit so fucking deep that like obviously I was on my healing journey already. Like I knew that I needed to give my brain and my soul that space. And so I just wanted to hear from you on like, what are your recommendations around, frequency and integration, and how long should people wait between, sessions? And obviously that's going to be so varied.
So I definitely think it's subjective, but I automatically, when you said that you were like, if I'm not present for these experiences, I'm not going to be able to take it into my everyday life. And it's that presence during the ceremony mixed in with how well you can integrate what happens in the ceremony into your everyday life. So in my opinion, although sitting with the medicine is obviously an important part, the most important part, if you want to see long-lasting results, is the integration process. You sat with the medicine, whether you did mushrooms and you were there for, 4 to 6 hours, or you did fucking San Pedro and you were there for 12 hours. You know what I mean? So like, no matter what you did, we're taking this now, like we're taking it into our hands and we're going, okay, now how do I place this, my journey, boom, into action, into my everyday, quote unquote, regular life. So I think integration differs for everyone with how frequently people need sessions. First off, I think that part of integration is having a process that you can do every day. And something that Dylan and I talk about a lot is the everyday process that you can have is either sitting in silence, even if it's just for 5 minutes, just like close your fucking door and sit in silence for 5 minutes, or go out on a walk. Like people think that we're asking them to do this like 2-hour long yoga practice and then do sound healing. And we're like, no, we just need you to be checking in with yourself every day, even if it's like 5 to 10 minutes, because some people go back to their regular life. And we get a lot of like parents, and they're like, I have 4 children, which I'm like, that's a lot of kids. How the fuck are you supposed to hear your own thoughts when you got 4 little humans screaming at you, Like, so something daily that you can move around your schedule, but you can also enjoy, where you're like, okay, right, that is something that came up for me. Yes. So like, I personally, I like brain dumping for myself. for everyone, it's different. And so I feel like Dylan being like the integration specialist for my like retreats and ceremonies would speak into this better. But like for me, brain dumping is exactly always what I need, because I just sit there with the pen to the paper, 5-10 minutes every single day, and boom, everything starts coming out of my journey, things that I already forgot. And that's the reason why we focus on integration. A lot of times we say, like, if there are free integrations that you can go to, like we host a free one over Zoom every month.
Amazing.
I mean, sometimes we're like, last month we ended up having like an emergency, so we had to cancel integration for the month. But like every month we pick a date. Like this month it's June 11th. And so we get on Zoom, and if people want to come, cool, they don't have to. It's free. And obviously we're not getting like, it's not a one-on-one session. So you're not like having these enormous breakthroughs, but it's healing in community again. So showing up to see that there's, we only take 10 people at a time because we like to keep it really small, but like that 10 people are also, or 9 other people are still feeling the same way you are.
Yeah.
Because the integration process can be heartbreaking when you had this thing happen, this ceremony, this journey happen, and then you come back to regular life and you have 4 kids and they're all screaming at you and you're like, they don't get it. No, they don't fucking get it. And that's why you have to show up for yourself. Yes. Right? So like Dylan's schedule, I think he usually does every other. Like when people do private sessions with him, they do every other. And there are people that specifically only go to him for pre-integration, like when they're preparing for a journey, especially if they're sitting by themselves. Mm-hmm. They like to have that pre-integration. And then post-integration, we always have for the people that come on our retreats and other people that sit with us in ceremony privately. I think twice a month, if you're sitting down with somebody that, one, understands medicine, and 2, understands the integration process. I love my therapist and she does her best to understand, right? But sometimes when I explain something, she gets it as much as she can get it.
From her level of awareness. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. So making sure that you have that team that you can talk to, which is why we tell people, this is my phone number. If you need to just send me a voice memo of absolute nonsense because you need to get it out of your brain, I'll listen to it and I can respond and be like, yes, I've been there many times. I totally understand, and it's nice to, sometimes people for their integration, all they need is the validation. Yes. But the reality is that you can do a ceremony and it can take you a year, it can take you 2 years to fully integrate these things properly to your everyday life. But it's not just okay, I'm going to go on, the Zoom integration once a month and I'm going to really move through it. No, this is, you sat with the medicine. Now you got to sign up to sit with yourself every day forward.
Totally. I feel like I almost want to say less is more when it comes to psychedelics, because of this integration process, like you said, the integration is just as important, if not more important, than the medicine itself. And so, like I definitely have found this to be true in my personal life, is that like less intense experiences, more time to integrate, because psychedelics are very intense experiences, especially if you have trauma come up, if you have visionary experiences, maybe your third eye just starts popping out and you see all these crazy cool things, and like that's amazing. But it also takes your psyche and your soul a little bit of time to recover. I mean, oftentimes, like towards the end of a trip, I just want to close my eyes and go to sleep, and my brain's like, no, what about this? What about that? Like all these colors, patterns, it's like, you're just like, brain, can you just shut up for like 5 seconds? And like often that can be really draining. I find physically, emotionally, mentally draining. And I just want to encourage people to have less is more. Less really is more, I think, when it comes to psychedelics, and giving yourself that time to integrate and making sure that you are actively doing integration, not just thinking it's going to passively happen. Because yes, it will passively happen, but you want to be actively working with whatever has come up during the trip, during the journey.
I could not agree more with everything that you just said. One of the first things that Dylan said to me, and I thought it was like, he just like came out of nowhere. Like we were working at the same plant medicine church, but we weren't working together yet. And he was like, yeah, I think it's a load of bullshit when people tell me that they've sat with ayahuasca over 300 or 400 times, but they're not the ayahuasca servers, right? Like ayahuasca servers, it's different. Like those that have trained in the jungle, right? And he was like, I think it's bullshit. And I was like, what? And he was like, obviously they don't know how to fucking integrate because they just keep sitting with more medicine. He was like, they're not taking a moment to actually listen to what they received in the last one. So they just keep doing it again. And then the more and more I worked there, the more and more I saw that it was so apparent. And I think that's where it starts to be like that reel that you saw where I was like, stop sitting with medicine if you think it's fucking cool. Stop sitting with medicine if you think it makes you more spiritual, because there are these people that are sitting with medicine constantly over and over and over again because they're like, it's fucking cool. Last year when we took we took people for a 7-day retreat in Peru, Dylan and I were like, I don't have the call to sit. Like, I don't have the call to sit with medicine. So what we did was there were 2 ayahuasca ceremonies that we had. And on the first night, I drank what would be considered a facilitator's dose because I really didn't feel like I needed to take a mat. And then the second night we switched. He took a facilitator's dose just so that one of us that was, you know, I mean, we had the maestro and he had his disciples, and then we were the facilitators in the room. But so at least one of us was still like in the energy, right? But then the other person that would like, we didn't have the call to be like, I need a full dose. I need to get down on this mat. And then what Dylan received from his facilitator's dose was that he's been doing ayahuasca since he's 17. That was his first journey was when he was 17. He was like, the medicine and he was like, I was told by ayahuasca that we're going on a break. He was like,
closing a chapter.
She was like, you have other medicines that are going to be more supportive. She's like, I was supportive for you then. Now you really, I'll let you know. And they really do let you know when it's time again. But some people, they just get wrapped up in this world and they think it like adds some type of fucking, it's very ego driven. It's also people are very susceptible. So if you hang out around other people that are like, oh yeah, like people in like PSOC in Peru that fucking drink every weekend, bro, read a book. What are you doing? Like, what's wrong with you? You know? So like if you just did medicine and you don't really know about this psychedelic world, and then you sit with these people and they're like, oh yeah, well, we're going next weekend. You want to join us? Then that's how other people get roped into it. So it's also doing your research and talking to multiple communities.
Yes.
You know?
Totally. I love that. Yeah. And I think, like you said, the more you get comfortable with doing the work every single fucking day, like the less you need these external things to validate and to like help you heal. It's like, yes, we need these tools. Plant medicine is a very powerful, excuse me, a very powerful and very necessary tool for our world. But it's also a relationship that you're forming with this plant spirit, with this medicine spirit, and all relationships need to be based on integrity and respect and that giving and receivership energy, you know. And sometimes, you know, you're going to need to receive from the medicine, and other times you're going to need to give back to the medicine by giving back to your community, giving back to yourself, giving back to Gaia, you know?
I will say, I think I could even end it off fully here, like with plant medicine, is that like, know your why. And if your why is kind of like what is the true reason of your why? And then to take it a step further, what is your why rooted in? Is it rooted in the fact that, like, because we have had people that are like, no, I need this because it's going to up level my spiritual journey. And instead of it being genuinely that they're ready to like shed a layer and go to the next, they just want to be able to tell people that they did ayahuasca. That's rooted in your ego, right? But like, so what's your why? And what is your why rooted in? Is it ethical? Is it moral? And can you stand behind that? Yeah. And that, if you are listening to this and you really want to sit with any of the plant medicines, because I even feel that way with cacao, that I feel like some people sit like this is a medicine that I serve. And the way that I was taught wasn't that it was like constantly all the time. It's like, no, we have a lot of reverence for this medicine, even though it's not technically psychedelic, right? Well, it's not psychedelic, although you can have visions with it if you meditate deep enough, you know? But like, yeah, like, okay, so why am I sitting with this again? What is my why rooted in? And then again, can I stand behind that? You know, so I think that that's a really important piece for any of us that sit with the medicine, or anybody that's considering sitting with the medicine.
Totally. And thank you so much for bringing up that deeper why and that deeper rooted intention. I think it's so important, because if that why is genuine, then you will be able to connect to it through other things, you know, and through other ways of connecting with yourself. It's like, you don't need to validate your why just by doing plant medicine. It can be a connection that you're forming through multiple different avenues, plant medicine just being one tiny speck, you know. So yeah, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. It has been so much fun talking to you. I've loved everything you've had to say. Really, it's been amazing. And so yeah, where can people find you?
Thank you so much, because I always enjoy talking to you. Like, I have a good time when you and I talk, and I wish our places on the earth were closer.
Hey, we would jam so hard.
I know. So it will happen. One day it will happen. You and I will be hanging out in the physical. And thank you so much for this conversation and for being you. Instagram is obviously an easy place. We recorded this also on Instagram. So I have 2 pages. I have at Arhakos, which is my name. And then I have at Kaya.retreats, which is like the retreat page that I try to use a little bit more. But I also have my website, which is literally danarhakos.com. And that has everything on it that people could possibly need. And so if anybody wants to ask more questions, you will not be the first nor the last. So don't feel uncomfortable that any question is too big or too small. Our messages are literally always open. So
that's so sweet of you. And I'll put all of your links in the descriptions below. Thank you everyone for listening. And one last thing, what did I want to say? Oh yes, I would love to sit with medicine with you as a facilitator, and I make that intention for that to happen, however long that takes. Whenever that happens. I have no timelines, I have no plans. My life is just, Jesus is taking the wheel right now.
I always say I'm not just flying with the wind, I am the wind. So when people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, no clue. Not sure which way it's blowing today.
Amazing, sister. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much.
Oh, many blessings. I love you.
You too. Love you so much. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode and engage with all the wisdom that was shared. If you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to leave a review on your podcast platform of choice, as this really helps this wisdom reach new people. If you have any questions or queries, please feel free to reach out to me via Instagram DM or send me an email. You can follow me on my personal account on Instagram at Josie, Josie _Thorne, THORNE, or you can follow Sync and Flow, my business accounts, at Sync, that's spelled SYNC _in_flow. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or queries you may have. Otherwise, get in contact to book a free discovery call to start your self-healing spiritual journey today. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now, loves.